But I want to catch up with Tom Switzer, columnist with The Australian first. Good to see you, Tom.
Chris.
Tell us about this war in Iran. I'm really interested in your take on assuming victory. Let's assume that Iran is militarily knocked out. Forget about whether there's a regime change or not. We don't know. But with Iran neutered as a military and terrorist force in the region, how could things change?
Well, it's complicated because the Iranian-backed Shia militia, which is now severely humiliated and weakened since October 7, so most notably Hezbollah, they were the primary actors in helping the Americans on the ground defeating the Sunni Islamic State jihadists. This is how complicated it is. So what we're seeing here is a protracted sectarian war, if you like, between the Shia Iran and their proxies and the Sunni Gulf states and their proxies, essentially, that have morphed into these jihadists. So it's complicated in that regard. But on the other hand, if the regime collapses and the Shia crescent, the so-called axis of resistance, dissipates, then the Shia are going to be the new losers of the Persian Gulf. And they may well turn to Shia militia groups that are hell-bent on seeking revenge against the Sunni jihadists.
Yeah, it is just extraordinary when you think about it in those terms. I sometimes think that Shia-Sunni divide is more important than the sovereign boundaries there.
Well, some MAGA Republicans cheekily say the West can't solve this Sunni-Shia dispute. Let Allah sort it out.
Oh, good Lord. The bloodshed would be extreme. But the point here is, wouldn't we expect more of those Sunni Arab nations, Saudi Arabia prime among them, to perhaps normalise relations with Israel?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a key point. The Abraham Accords that the United States under President Trump negotiated between Israel and some of those Sunni Gulf states, that would definitely expand, including Saudi Arabia, which would be a geopolitical bonanza for Israel.
Yeah, that's what I think is one of the great benefits that could come out of this. Let's hear a bit more from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
We're going to unleash Cheng on these people in the next few hours and days. You're going to really begin to perceive a change in the scope and in the intensity of these attacks as, frankly, the two most powerful air forces in the world take apart this terroristic regime and defang it and take away its ability to threaten its neighbours.
Defang it. Now, I don't think there's any doubt that the Americans and the Israelis can defang Iran, even though it's a massive military and quite a large country, certainly by Middle Eastern terms. But what about regime change? Do you think there's a realistic expectation that the people of Iran, those who are opposed to the regime, can overthrow the government?
Well, on the one hand, I think the Islamic Republic is facing its gravest crisis since 1979, the revolution that brought them to power. They face serious economic troubles, domestic unrest, and as we mentioned before, their Shia crescent, the axis of resistance, is dissipating. But on the other hand, this regime has shown that it is a durable, bloody, ruthless enterprise. And the other point to bear in mind is if they can last 4 to 5 weeks of this campaign, that's a big if, but if they can, and the Americans, remember, 75% of the American people oppose this intervention, and they have a very limited stockpile of munitions, if the Iranian regime can hold out for 4 to 5 weeks, then they live to see another day.
Yeah, time is on the side of the Iranian regime, who look like electing the Ayatollah's son as their new supreme ruler. Just going on to the geopolitical ramifications here, though, I want to talk about China. We know what the Americans have done in Venezuela. Very powerful when it comes to oil exports from Venezuela, often find their way to China, as do the oil exports from Iran. To what extent is this play motivated by restricting the energy needs of China?
I'm not sure if it's motivating the Trump administration's decision, but it's certainly a consequence of the actions. Remember, the Straits of Hormuz accounts for something like 20% of trade of oil and gas. Now, already we're seeing a spike in prices, especially for gas, and that will hurt China because for all the talk about China decarbonising their economy and relying on wind farms and solar panels, they are still heavily addicted to carbon energy, and a lot of that comes from the Persian Gulf.
So we could weaken China strategically and strengthen the US when it comes to those energy needs. Just very quickly, coming back to the possible benefits, and you talk about the Shia crescent, you think about Syria and Lebanon constantly torn apart in recent years by civil war and unrest. Without the cat's paw of Iran in their affairs. Do they have a chance to stabilise?
Possibly, but remember, Iraq now in the post-Saddam Hussein era is a Shia regime because 60% or so of the population are Shia. They're the new winners in the post-Saddam Hussein Iraq.
And they'll make sure it stays that way because Saddam Hussein was a Sunni in the minority who held it over them.
And, of course, what happened was that the Sunnis became the new losers in Iraq and they turned to a lot of these jihadist groups. It's just a reminder of how complicated and, frankly, morally ambiguous this part of the world is.
Morally ambiguous, complicated, fascinating and vitally important. Thanks so much for joining us,
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Appreciate it.